All right, you curious and curious or Herle Burly, I'd still be no intro grasping at humor today. I can't compete. Too intimidated. Because our guest on the pod is genuine Canadian comedy royalty. Mark Critch is here. The co-creator, and co-writer of the hit CBC series Son of a Critch, based on his best-selling memoir. For 22 years, a cast member and writer of CBC's longest-running comedy series, This Hour Has 22 Minutes, the recipient of 6 Canadian Screen Awards and 3 Gemini Awards, a best-selling author, the aforementioned Son of a Critch, and an embarrassment of Critches. And he's got a new book coming out this month. And boy, you should read this one. It's funny as hell. Sorry Not Sorry, an unapologetic look at what makes Canada worth fighting for. So we're going to talk to Mark a little bit about his background and how Canada's always punched above its weight comedically. And especially in light of today's climate, I want to have a conversation about political humor and satire and what its role is in a healthy democracy. Mark Critch, such a pleasure to welcome you to the Herle Burly today. Thanks for doing this, man.
Oh, thank you so much. This is my favorite podcast. Me and my wife, Melissa, we always, it's the one we can agree on. So it's always in the car or whatever. It's just the absolute best. So it's a real treat for me to be here.
Get out. You listen to our podcast.
Oh, I've heard every episode, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, air quotes media in the background. You now know what the promo for this episode is. All right. So we're big fans of each other. But hey, you know what? We have to start out by saying we are recording this on Remembrance Day.
Yeah.
So what does this occasion bring to mind for you?
Remembrance Day is a pretty powerful day for us in Newfoundland and Labrador, where I'm from, because, of course, before Canada joined us, July 1st was a very solemn day. It's our Memorial Day, and it still is, marking in the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Beaumont-Hamel, where pretty much a whole generation of our best and brightest were wiped out in an hour. So every year we start our day going to the War Memorial there, which is now it's a national war memorial, and it is our home of the unknown soldier. We brought a soldier was repatriated from Europe this last year, and it's interesting because it's Canada Day everywhere else, and then it is the last gasp, I think, of our own nationhood. And in the morning, we all go down to the war memorial. It's very solemn. 11 o'clock, we take our poppies off. At noon, it transforms into a celebration of this new country. So I always think it's almost like it's remembrance of all those who have fought for our countries, and it's also almost feels like a little wake for the country that once was, because that was our national war memorial.
Right, and you go into the absorption of Newfoundland by Canada in some detail in your new book, and you make it seem like quite a loveless financial transaction at the outset. So when did it develop some passion?
Well, it was interesting because my father was 93 when he passed. I think he'd be 103 today. Dad covered Confederation for the Daily News newspaper. And he would tell me about how there was a great connection between Newfoundlanders and Americans because of all the military bases. And that when the war started and the bases came, that was the first time most Newfoundlanders had cash in their pockets. And it was a big shift, and everybody loved the Americans. Canadians were there too. We were, sort of Brits, but there wasn't a big bond with the Canadians. And then so we go off and it's kind of arranged marriage, and we become Canadians. And for the first long time in Canada, I remember, like, even as a kid, if anything to do with somebody from Ontario or wherever, they'd start telling you Newfie jokes, and Newfie joke books used to be sold in stores. And it was, this whole thing about goofy Newfies and how many Newfies it take to screw in a light bulb and all this stuff. And I think it took for a while for us to find our footing. But I've heard people talk about how, we're quite poor before that. I don't think people realize how poor Newfoundland and Labrador was before we joined. And I hear stories of people saying that every year you see the kids get a bit fatter, a little bit taller, a little bit plumper. And that was a big difference, because the baby bonus was there and the money was coming in. But eventually we really found our place in Canada. And I think what's interesting is we were the butt of the joke. There were Newfie joke books. And now a lot of Canadian comedians are Newfoundlanders. And when you think of a Rick Mercer, or even like people like Rex Murphy and stuff, I don't think people think of Newfoundlanders as backward and stupid or anything else. And I think we're successful as comedians and commentators because in the same way Canada is a bit removed from the States looking over the fence of what's going there, we came to the party late. We're an island off the edge. So we can look at, and we have a different, maybe a darker sense of humor than a lot of Canadians. We can look at things and kind of take the mickey quite naturally.
Right. Well, I can tell you that out in Saskatchewan, we weren't making Newfie jokes. We were making those same jokes about Ukrainians.
Well, it's the same joke, right?
Yeah.
Any group, it's that they're made today about all kinds of different jokes. It's always the same joke. But
now you can't make fun of anybody. You can only make, in fact, I am a representative of the only race of people that it is still okay to make fun of, and that's Germans.
I guess, there is, you can't get, and I guess now Americans in Canada, we can,
yeah.
There was a time after 9/11 we were like, oh, and Rick Mercer's like, I'm not talking to Americans anymore. It's wrong. And now people are like, I think we can again.
Yeah, I think that's right. Hey, listen, I got to tell you something that I heard something about Newfoundland a couple of months ago, and I can't get it out of my head. And I can't think of Newfoundland the same way since I heard this.
What?
Because it's so obvious, but I'm 63 years old and I'd never thought of it before. That the person who wrote down Newfoundland surely was using that as a placeholder. They didn't intend that to be the name of the place.
Yeah. Newfoundland. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, absolutely. It's in the notes folder. Yeah, surely we'll come up with something later. But then people are like, they were just there for work. It was just a place to come and fish, and it was even illegal to stay over during the winters and stuff. So it was very much kind of like the oil patch. Of its day, and it's very much a placeholder. Yeah, eventually we'll come up with something.
All right, you information craving Herle Burlyites. Who wants to learn more about AI nodes and stacks? Rhetorical question. It's my pod and I make the rules. Thus, I give you more AI demystification from our presenting sponsor, TELUS, who are rightly proud of their new sovereign AI factory in Rimouski, Quebec. So, nodes. Love that sentence. 2 little words, but an infinite amount of computational power. Because an AI node is akin to a brain neuron. It works to process data. And when one node is linked to other nodes, they collectively solve the most complex problems. But while a human brain's approximately 86 billion neurons are limited by physical constraints, AI nodes can scale infinitely and process data at superhuman speeds. TELUS is using the most advanced GPUs from NVIDIA for their nodes, capable of performing trillions of calculations per second. I don't mind telling you that my personal set of 86 billion neurons, if it's still that, can hardly comprehend that. Moving on to the accurately named AI stack and what makes TELUS's so special. Accurate because it's basically layer upon layer of tech, data center, computer hardware, storage, security, networking, orchestration, platform, applications. All of these complex functions coming together in a manageable system to enable efficient and scalable AI implementation. But remember, it's not just an AI factory, it's a sovereign AI factory by design, which is true for every layer of the stack. So all components of the factory, all those layers I just talked about, are under Canadian control, empowering businesses to be AI creators here at home without foreign dependence. Next week, more AI demystification and a deeper dive into TELUS's unique relationship with NVIDIA. All right, so normally I spend part of these interviews talking to people about their childhood and their background, but you've actually turned your childhood and background into a television series. So I'm not sure we need to spend so much time on that. What do you think it is about your life that people find interesting? Because it's been both a successful book and a very successful television series.
I don't think anybody thinks their life is overly interesting until they start to tell the story. I mean, I remember one time I was at a house party with Alan Doyle, the great, singer songwriter, and he's he's a proper Newfoundlander. He grew up, in Petty Harbor and cutting out cod tongues and stuff. And I was talking about how I grew up on the edge of town next to the radio station, no other kids around or anything like that. And he started looking at me with this mix of kind of interest and pity. And he's like, is that true? And I started telling him a few stories. And I go, what? And I thought, oh, right, I'm a bit weird. But
Right.
what I've learned from the show, especially now that it's gone, not only in Canada, but now it's on TV Friday nights in Ireland, and it's on Netflix in the States and doing well. And I get these messages from people. I got a note from a Southern Baptist preacher who uses bits from the show in his sermons. I got a lovely letter from a Jewish grandmother in California who said that her kid was getting picked on. They'd watched the show on Netflix, and then he decided to use the Mark method because he said he would use humor to try and win over the bullies, and it worked, and now he had a girlfriend. And I thought, that's amazing. The Mark method never worked for me as a kid, but it worked for him. But I think things can be very unique and singular and odd. And this kid growing up in the 80s in Newfoundland, it may seem very singular and not many people can relate. But everybody's had a crush on the girl who didn't like you back, or everybody's been bullied, or everybody's felt like an outsider. So I think those are the moments that people connect with, you know?
Right. And humor did really get you through with the bully?
Oh my God. Yeah. I remember I was pushed up against a chain link fence, Mundy Pond Road, St. Teresa's School. And this guy was just going to kick the crap out of me because my dad was on the radio. He was like, your father's on the radio. I'm like, yeah, come here. I'm like, what I do? And then I started doing an impression of the vice principal, Mr. Dunn, who is the teacher on, the prefect for that day. And I was trying to get his attention really on the parking lot. And the guy laughed, and he called over his buddy, and they laughed. And eventually his grip on my shirt got less and less tight.
The court jester.
I became a court jester. And I do the same thing now. Now I make fun of the prime minister. I used to make fun of nuns. It's the exact same thing.
When did you find yourself first interested in something political?
Oh man, Newfoundland and Labrador, it's like wrestling, right? Like we'd be talking, Dad, the newspaper was always out, Dad was a reporter. And these big characters, like a John Crosby, is kind of like a wrestler. I didn't take the fish out of JD water. And like all the politicians were very colorful and interesting. The news was always on the house. So I got to know a lot of these people. And then when I started 15 years old, we rented out a theater, and myself and my buddies started doing sketch comedy. Had to do in a little bit of that stuff. And then I started to write a column when I was 20.
Why would you have to do some of that stuff? Like, you're doing comedy for kids. Kids aren't interested.
Well, but in Newfoundland, that was it, right? Your Codco is Codco and this other thing, Wonderful Grand Band, were our forerunners. I mean, when I was 15 or 16, I tore tickets for Rick Mercer's first one-man show. And I'm watching Rick there, and that was all politics. Rick's a couple of years older than me. And I'm watching Rick do that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's the way forward. And people are laughing and going crazy. And I write a lot, and I write very quickly. And I write a lot, most of the stuff I do on the show and for 22 and stuff. And I kind of like, something happens, write about it, comment on it, and then put it away. Like, I've never been a stand-up who's going to do like an hour of material and work that 20 minutes for 4 years or something. I was kind of like, I got something to say. I got to get it out. That's gone now. What's next? But that was just the way it's done in Newfoundland.
What's funny about politicians or politics? What's the thing about it that makes it funny?
False earnestness, trying to just, like, say Trump, right? Trump will start and he'll start talking about something. And the same thing with this whole Canada thing we got in a mess in. Trudeau came, he kind of liked Trudeau. Then Trudeau's caught on a hot mic making fun of him. So now he doesn't like him anymore. And he's, mad at him. And then they have this dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and he makes this joke about the governor and the 51st state. And then he repeats it. Look what I said. And then people go, yeah, good idea. And he's like, yeah, I meant that. I really did. And now he's just kind of free-forming and falling forwards. And now there's tariffs and everything. And I kind of think there's a lot of policy happens in the moment in self-preservation. I think the self-preservation is always very funny. And all these big plans that people make and they come out and they can see them as they announce them falling apart in real time. I always find that naked. There's a lot of like covering up, but the person is naked. And it's fascinating. And it's very childish. Like all this floor crossing stuff that's happening now. And like, imagine Andrew Scheer bursting into your office and like threatening you or trying to be fit. And now, like, and all these, what I find hilarious now is how question
If
periods.
you are in a job where
Yeah.
Andrew Scheer is in a position to threaten you, you've made a serious vocational error.
Oh my God, imagine just having the balls like to think you could be threatening and come in and it's like it's starting to fall apart. And Pierre is starting to see everything crumble, and people are less afraid of him and people are less afraid of Jenny and all this stuff. And so all this protection, like this big superpower is starting to crumble. And it's wild because everybody's starting to panic now a little bit. So I find all that it's very high school at times, which I also find interesting. And the more you know the characters, the sillier it gets. And this fake this question period stuff where everybody's just doing clips for social media is insane. And oftentimes I get to it, like the CBC stuff drives me crazy because Pierre's like, defund the CBC. Nobody tweets about the friggin' CBC more than Pierre Poilievre. He's always using clips to make his argument. All these conservative people, I see him in the airport, happened to be 2 days ago. Conservative MP goes, can I get a picture with you? Oh, my sister loves you and everything like that. And I'm like, frig off, you arsehole. You're just driving me crazy, this performative stuff. But it's also soon.
Tomorrow is November 11th. Tomorrow we remember the men and women who went off to fight for Canada in foreign wars, some of whom came back with terrible physical and mental injuries, and many of whom did not come back at all. Ask only that we remember. And we do remember, with immense gratitude. Our sponsor, CN, proudly remembers how its railroaders served at home and overseas. During the Great War, the Corps of Canadian Railway troops, drawn from Canadian railway companies, were responsible for building light rail tracks near the Western Front in France and Belgium from 1917 onwards. And here at home, rail companies that would eventually form Canadian National Railway moved troops across Canada to the seaports from which they embarked. During World War II, the Canadian war effort moved mostly on the railways. Their tracks and trains carried 90% of the war's cargo, triple the pre-war volume. CN's resources, its trains, its yards, its shops, its staff, were placed at the disposal of the government and Allied war effort. New locomotives and rolling stock were ordered. CN moved everything from soldiers to tanks to armored vehicles to ammunition. By 1944, Canada had built 40,000 miles of track. Rail had become the single largest wartime industry, employing 150,000 people. And once again, of course, Canadian railroaders donned uniforms and went off to war. They were, in fact, among the first to be placed on active service. They gave and they sacrificed. You will read a singular phrase this week, lest we forget. We will not forget what those people did. We will never forget. You talked about the fake earnestness of it and all that kind of stuff. Like I watched in preparation for this interview, I rewatched your interview with Trudeau at the end of 2024, and I rewatched your interview with Scheer from a few years before that. These people are so unself-aware. These people are so afraid to be funny with you that they make you unfunny. Like it is a dead sketch. It is a dead sketch because, let's take Trudeau for an example. Shows no, admittedly, he's in a bad spot and everything, but he shows no ability to roll with you. He takes everything that you say as a shot that needs to be rebutted earnestly.
Yeah.
Right? Like he goes on your show and is deliberately unfunny.
Well, there's two schools of thoughts on that.
And he's not an unfunny guy, by the way.
No, he's very fun. And if we did one where he taught me how to snowboard, which he actually got me up on the thing, he was quite good in that because he's not thinking. Because if they're doing something, they're often, if there's a task involved, that is interesting because it disarms them a bit. Because now they're focused on that. They kind of forget the thing. But, you got to, the more comfortable someone is in a 22 minutes interview, I think, the better a person they are with less stuff to hide. When I find somebody's really guarded, or Pierre won't do it at all now, and so silly, but the less like Critch will just roll in. I don't care. He talk over you. He doesn't care what's going on. It's like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah, but any chance for him to talk about himself is a chance he will take.
100% every time, and he'll just come in and go, and he's great, and he's off the cuff. And then other people are very guarded. I just did on it'll air on this evening's episode. I just interviewed Minister Champagne
Oh yeah,
about the budget, and he's good. He's very much of the Critch school in that, you know, he'll go with it. He'll rebut. He'll argue with me, and everything, and that's kind of fun because you have your questions prepared, and then it starts, and then you throw that out the window, and you're just comedy is reaction, right? So
right.
you have something to bounce off. You're fine.
Yeah. What other political comedians have has what work have you enjoyed of other political comedians? What kind of political comedy do you like?
Um, I enjoy Jon Stewart a lot on the Daily Show. When he does it, I think there's two types of comedy, political comedy these days. It's people reading stuff somebody else wrote, and I enjoy anyone who is saying something they wrote or feel. And especially, there's a lot of faux outrage, I think, out there about things too. But if somebody is genuinely, like, I can see it myself on 22 Minutes, I'll do these little monologues with, you know, video screen behind me. And when it's something I'm actually ticked off about or care about, they can tell. And whether they agree or disagree, they kind of get on board because they can feel this guy's being truthful,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And I know that to be a fact. And it's just I don't know what it is. It's just something between people in that moment, you know. And anybody who means what they're saying, I very much enjoy. Anybody who's like relying too much on like 52 writers and is reading a bunch of stuff is kind of like, But yeah, so I anybody who's in the moment, I enjoy, whether I agree with them or I disagree with them. And a lot of stuff coming out of the UK is quite interesting as well. You know, they do a panel show in a way that Canada's never been able to do for some reason. Because so maybe I don't know why that is, but I love that kind of thing, the UK stuff.
So politics has become so polarized. Do you think it's possible to be funny to both sides of the divide? Do you think one comedian can make both conservatives and small L liberals laugh these days?
100%, because social media is wrong, right? It's like this outrage, like the outrage, you know, whether it's, you know, Jenny Byrne or somebody got mad at something stupid I said, and she wasn't really mad, I don't think, but wrote me this big DM, oh, you arsehole, and all. It's like, frig off, Jenny, will you? It's like, face to face, everybody's fine, right? And most Canadians are in the middle. Most Canadians can laugh at both sides. We have it all the time on our show. We'll do a thing where Mark McKinney's playing Carney. People laugh. We have a thing where Chris Wilson's playing Pierre Poilievre. People laugh. Because most people aren't going around in a hockey jersey for a political party all the time. And even those who are, I mean, I have friends and people who like what I do in every party. And you'd be shocked at some of the people I'll sit down, have a beer with, and have no problem with, right? Because it's their, like I say, I always call them they're bad wrestlers. Like they want to get booed. Like they had to go in and attack you and hit you with the chair every now and then, but they don't mean it. But there's less than that. I was talking to a young new MP, ran into, and I was saying, you know what you should do? In the old days, people used to go have a drink after question period together and get along with each other. And like just faux outrage about Champagne talking to some journalists and having a beer after the budget, when everybody who's tweeting about it did it with Flaherty or whoever in the past. And I've been, that drives me freaking crazy. And
the hypocrisy.
That has to stop, right? That has to stop. And and he's like, I wouldn't, he told me, this young fella told me, I wouldn't be able to because I've been told they'd record me. And I'm like, right. They're not recording you, man. Go talk to people. People are people. But this whole thing that everybody's evil on the other side is absolute hogwash. And I think people are getting sick of it in Canada a bit. And it's like, will you just go do something?
So let me challenge you. Isn't everybody on MAGA bad?
No.
No?
No.
How can you be a good person and be for Trump?
I think it depends on why you're for him. And I think we have to be there's a bit of holier than thou stuff that happens a bit on the left, I think. And you get that on the other side as well. But I think that there are people who felt left behind, and there's a rage and all that stuff. But then there's people who just want to get by and they believe the stuff about the grocery prices and stuff. And yeah, you might disagree with that. And yes, they should say, well, if you do this, then I shouldn't back you no matter what. But you don't know the reasons why people are not. I wouldn't assume they are. I would talk to them. And anytime I actually
but wait a second, it's not just because it's not just about policies, Mark, right? The guy's objectively a terrible, terrible person
Oh,
at being a
100% he is.
person. So it's hard for me to really accept that people would choose him, even though they thought even if they thought his policies were marginally better, given what a reprehensible person he is.
I disagree with them, but I don't think they're necessarily evil. You know what I mean? Like that's a difference. And I think the more we talk to each other, because the other thing is, and I see this all the time, is the social media stuff. People are only seeing the things they agree with, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you used to be, even news became opinion for everybody. And
Yep.
when it was just a fact, and then there'd be one person would come on once a week with an opinion piece
Yeah.
on the news, and that was like so rare that some guy is just
Rex Murphy.
yeah. And then, but now it's only opinion.
Right.
And I find when I talk to somebody, generally you'll meet more in the middle, but I think people don't talk. And I think part of like going like, okay, they're MAGA, they're necessarily bad is part about talking. And I think the more we talk, the better we are. But I think
Really, have you had a conversation with anybody about climate change? Did you find that at the end of it you were closer together?
No, but I have found out that I think maybe their issue isn't climate change. It will become it's not necessarily that. The more you talk about it, I think people don't understand a lot of that stuff because the I mean there's the Newfoundland and Labrador oil industry got more money from Trudeau than it ever had from anybody else. And there's like, green targets and stuff like this. And you talk about caps and everything like that. But the more you talk to somebody about that, they have no idea about it. I think the Liberals, maybe on a lot of the climate stuff, have just had bad comms to your average Joe. And I think that maybe things it all comes down to communication. And the more we're able to communicate, what drives me crazy is the less we do.
Right.
It's a lot of people talking to themselves, and that's what drives me crazy.
The following is a political advertisement. To build a strong Canadian economy, we need a Made in Canada plan. Public service workers power our economy. They support small businesses and keep our supply chain moving. Canada's economic resilience relies on having strong public services. To strengthen our economy, we need to invest in public services. Learn how at forucanada.ca. This message was paid for by the Public Service Alliance of Canada.
Well, let's talk about your book a little bit.
Okay.
You've written a book that is all about why Canada is worth defending.
Mm-hmm.
When in your life did you realize that you were passionate about Canada?
It's interesting because in Newfoundland and Labrador, which we all Newfoundlanders talk about too much, I know, but we grew up kind of a chip on our shoulder.
You're like Irish people. You're awfully taken with your own backgrounds, I would say.
Oh, the green fields. But we would always like think of Canada as like, they took our nationhood and everything. And at a certain point, I'd be like, there'd be songs like all these songs about, thank God we're surrounded by water is one, and these songs about separating. And on the back, it would always say, paid for by the Canada Council, SOCAN.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
Yeah, exactly, right. But what 22 minutes did for me is it's given me a great gift that a lot of Canadians don't have. Is because of all these field pieces, I've been able to travel this country. I've been able to meet Canadians. I've been able to see Canadians don't go to other places in Canada. They go to Florida.
It's too expensive for one thing.
It's too big and it's too expensive. It's insane. But I've been able to get around and see it and how unique it is and how the different cultures are and how great Saskatchewan is and how different that is compared to BC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most Canadians don't get that, to do that. Right. And I think that's a big problem probably with our sense of identity and all this stuff. But as I did that, I started to get it. And especially in Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, you're often raised to think Quebec is evil because of all the hydro deals and stuff. And I get there, and Quebecers are Newfoundlanders. They only watch their own entertainers. They're always pissed off at Ottawa. They have, their own language. And they'll probably will either kiss you or fight you. And there's nothing in between. And I thought, okay, well, this is a lot similar. Maybe part of the problem between us is that we're so similar. So the great gift I've had is being able to meet Canadians. And that, I think, made me passionate about Canada.
Right. Well, it is an amazing, great country. I want to say, though, before people get the wrong impression, This book is laugh out loud funny. I I spit my rum and coke up when I was reading about your definition, your description, sorry, of Mr. Dress Up in The Friendly Giant. And you ultimately characterized Mr. Dress Up in a way I'd never thought of as a child, and it made me, Christ, it was hysterical. So
Oh,
well
thank
done.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Well, that there's a chapter on CanCon in there and stuff. And it's very interesting because that's kind of slipping away a bit. That was a big part of our identity, is that we all had this gathering place, which was television or radio, and that's so splintered now. And that makes me worried a little bit about the future.
Have you heard of the Trans Canada Highwaymen?
Oh my God, I love them. And that's
Oh,
exactly what we should be
right.
doing.
Those songs, all those songs that were part of the CanCon canon, if you will, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the kids today have any common experience like that of
No.
music and TV shows that are purely and frankly, obviously Canadian.
It's when things go viral. I mean, I've seen that, like, we are very lucky on 22 because it's very clippable, right? So I get people. I went to a bank a while ago. I went to the bank old school because I'm dead inside. I'm 97 years old inside. And the guy behind the counter is like, "You're the guy from TikTok." And I said, "No, sir, I'm not." He goes, "Yes, you are. You're the guy from TikTok." I said, "I'm not. What are you talking about?" And he shows me the TikTok. I'm like, "Oh yeah, those are sketches from 22 minutes." He said, "What's 22 minutes?" I said, "It's our show on CBC." He said, "What's CBC?" And I
Right.
just lay on the floor and cried. But it was like, but there's a whole world out there. And I think those moments and things will go viral because of a shared commonality in the moment. And like that is, I think that is now the kitchen table, is sometimes as a group mind we'll agree that something is something that we want to share together. And oftentimes there'll be purely Canadian stuff. There's all this Edmund Fitzgerald stuff is crazy now online. Gordon Lightfoot is what all the kids are listening to. Who knew?
Right. And Lightfoot's a rare example of an artist that didn't need CanCon back in the 70s or
Yeah.
80s to be successful. But I mean, your show, uh, nobody's going to make that show just so it can be carved into TikTok clips.
No, but I you know what? It there's a couple of clips going. Son of a Critch is going crazily viral on TikTok, as well as 22. It's there. It's We need the money, but for both of those things, it shows there's an audience who wants this stuff. But you do need a network to make it, and you do need the funding there. And people talk about why fund things like the CBC, blah blah blah. It's to do the things that other people don't want to take a chance at, and also to help cover this great giant country. It is huge. Every province needs a bit of support to get the message out about who they are.
Well, let's take a hard run at this because the CBC narrowly escaped the axe in last spring's election, because I believe that Mr. Poilievre is quite serious about dealing with the CBC. And I think its future is still in doubt because political uncertainty. I tend to defend the CBC on the basis of its importance to news gathering and reporting and having a source of factual basis for our discussions in this country. How would you defend the importance of CBC English television? Because that's really, to put a narrow point on it, that's the vulnerability, right? Nobody's that upset about radio. Nobody's going to touch French. What is the defense of English television?
Defense on English television is CBC has, the big building in Toronto and all that stuff and whatever. But we have a giant country with different regions, and we have with different voices and different cultures. And I think what CBC does best when it does it is a show like, with Son of a Critch is a very Newfoundland thing, right? And that is a part of who we are. And I think if CBC went deep on diversity a while ago, and we got to see a lot of different cultures and a lot of different faces and a lot of different ethnicities and backgrounds there. Another way
that alienated a lot of people who felt that something was being pushed on them, especially the Indigenous agenda.
Yeah, but some people will always feel stuff is pushed on them. But I would say there's another type of diversity, which is regional diversity. And I think maybe that's where CBC has dropped the ball a bit. And I think that's where it should really invest everything. And that there should be some great Albertan shows there, some great shows out of Saskatchewan, And, like us Newfoundlanders do, at 22 is shot in Halifax. People always assume it's in Toronto, but it's got there's a great, presence here. And I think that the CBC should be making shows that maybe other people wouldn't make, but that Canadians will embrace if they're done right. It won't embrace everything. Everything's not going to hit. And you had to make less and less shows than other networks would, or in the States. So you
Fewer
have
and
less
fewer,
chances
Mark.
at it.
Fewer and fewer.
Fewer and fewer. So,
Yes.
but I think there is, I think Canadians will embrace it when it's there, if it's good.
Did you know that Canada is a global leader in the production of medical isotopes? Canadian isotopes are life-saving tools used around the world every day to diagnose and treat cancers, sterilize medical equipment, and advance medical research. For decades, Canadian nuclear innovation has powered breakthroughs across healthcare, industry, and research. And today, through the Isotopes for Hope campaign, the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council is working to double our isotope production by 2030. Why? Because the world is counting on Canada. Medical isotopes are a promise that patients will get faster, more accurate diagnoses, a promise that hospitals will have the tools they need to precisely treat cancer and other diseases, and a promise that Canada will continue to lead in the development of nuclear technologies that benefit people here at home and around the world. From our CANDU power reactor fleet to our accelerator network, from research labs to hospitals, Canadians are driving innovation that brings hope and saves lives. By supporting Isotopes for Hope, we're not only securing Canada's leadership in the global isotope market, but we're also helping build a healthier future for everyone. The world is counting on us, but we can only rise to this challenge if we work together. It will take all of us, industry, the healthcare sector, governments, and the scientific community, all aligned to maximize the potential of Canadian-made isotopes and ensure that we continue to bring hope to patients when they need it most. Learn more at www.canadianisotopes.ca. Terry and I love murder mysteries, and the Brits make amazing murder mysteries. And so I'm pretty sure that if somebody has died in a fishing village in the British Isles in the last 25 years, I've seen a 8-part series on their death.
I love all that stuff.
I love all that stuff. Why aren't they set in Newfoundland and Nova
Well,
Scotia?
they have St. Pierre now, which is, on CBC. It's Alan Hocko's thing, which is Newfoundland adjacent. I mean, for years we had Republic of Doyle and stuff. I think probably like with CBC, it's kind of like you can't have, it gets the East Coast does shoot above its weight with a lot of that stuff. So you can't have everything there. But I agree. I think there should be lots of those murder. Those would work. And I don't know what it is about them. It's the quirky personalities.
They're not expensive. There's never a car chase. They never blow anything up. But they look good. They look very professional.
I think here's something too. And this is a thing with Canadian TV that I find is silly. Our show with Son of a Critch, people thought they were taking a chance on that because it was such a small Newfoundland story. And then they were like, oh, sometimes you get notes like, oh, don't say this phrase. They might not understand it. Or, oh, don't be too down. And I'm like, no, there's all kinds of things on those British shows or shows on Iceland that I don't freaking understand, but I get the gist of it. And I think we need to lean into the authenticity. Canadian TV starts to really suck when it tries to...
Gov. You just have to pick that up.
What's that?
Gov.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. You just pick it up. And it really... Canadian TV really sucks when it's trying to whitewash it so that it could be watched by someone in the States, right? We should never think about that. And I know people are always like, oh, I hope the show works. I hope... Don't ever think about that because you're messing with the point, and the authenticity is key, especially these days when people have stuff from all over the world. They will find it and get it. Just make it as pure as you can.
Hey, can we talk about Donald Trump for a bit?
Of course, he's incredible, great friend. Herle Burly.
Trump is a preposterous figure on his own.
Yeah.
How do you decide what to zero in on to make him funny and to caricature him? When you do your caricature, what did you decide What are the elements of Trump? You said, well, these are the funny elements of Trump.
What I think is the funniest thing about him is there's all kinds of things prepared. Hundreds of people had meetings. He was in briefings. He's been given stuff. There's a dossier of stuff on his desk. He starts and it'll just look at the window and it'll say, quite frankly, it's very gray out. And we know why. It's very gray because of what we're going to make it very bright. We're going to make it a lot less gray. You're going to see a lot less gray. We're working with incredible people. And it's going to be a lot more blue. And it's like, and then guys, and they start like, whoa, it's like in China, they put up the rockets and they'll make it a blue sky day. They go like, quite frankly, we're going to make the rockets, you're going to be bigger. And it's going to be day at night. We're going to have all day, all the time. Oh, Jesus Christ, what are we doing? And like, and they're off to the side. And that's what I love is he'll say something and he'll change it or adjust it based on how it's doing. It's like he's trying out new material and it'll be based on, and if somebody asks him a question about someone, he's a liar or he's a good guy. He doesn't know who the guy is. And he might like ruin the guy. And that's what I love. He's catching plates that he himself is throwing in the air, right? He's just going to throw a plate and see if he can catch it. Some break, but he doesn't care and he walks away. And there's zero, it's not like he worries about the consequences. He has zero interest in them. And I bet you he sleeps great at night because he's not a curious man, right? Yeah. So that kind of thing is like, he's like Mr. Magoo, but a fascist.
So on the surface, he looks entirely, as I said, preposterous. But to get where he's gotten, he must have some game. Can you see through all the preposterousness to find out what his actual talent is?
I think he's, it's that I think he's learned never back down at some point and always be right. And I think that there are a lot of very weak people in politics because pushback is death there. The career is very short, especially in America, the ability to do well after it. I think a lot of people are in it for what they're going to get after. And I think you have these people surrounded. So I think he's found a place where he can very easily walk over people and push the agenda with no pushback. But also he understands social media and like nobody else, no other leader before. He knows he can put it out there and most people will think it's real or truthful. And that there will be people who disagree with that, but the people who he wants to believe will never see that anymore because of the algorithm and stuff. So he can say and do whatever the hell he wants. And he can mostly get away with it, I think. And he's a brand as opposed to a person, and he's created this ridiculous brand, the stuff he sells and stuff. It's insane. But I think he's just kind of fearless. And when he lost that time to Biden, one thing is like, people have talked about this before, but there's that White House press correspondence dinner where Obama is up there making fun of him and and everybody laughs at him.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see him change in that moment. If he was a supervillain, that would be when he's bit by the radioactive spider. Right. And then you can see him go, I'm going to destroy all of you. And then he goes, whatever. And he does a thing. And then he loses. And then he's like, oh, I'm coming back, And I don't know what his view is now, but there's two moments where it's kind of like, you poking a bear or something. Like, I think that's when history changed in those, especially the Obama thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is because he's that vain and he's that superficial and he's that childish that I think in that moment, a lot of bad things started happening.
Still never would have predicted that he would get where he's gotten. I declared him politically dead many times in the first weeks of his candidacy.
I laughed, but you'd never know who the guy is, right? Did you ever think Pierre Poilievre would be prime minister back when he was Skippy with the little glass?
No, but more plausible than somebody that says John McCain's not a war hero because he got caught. Like, I just thought those kind of things would end you politically, right? And they don't, apparently.
Sure, memories are shorter now. Memories are shorter and morals are less a thing. And I think that's a big part of it. Social media really has changed things.
So Trump, I find to be personally preposterous, but I find his policy agenda to be dead serious and dead frightening, both as it pertains to the world, and as it pertains to the United States, and as it pertains to Canada. I take it all very seriously. When you make fun of it and mock it, make people laugh about it, do you think you are diminishing the seriousness of it?
No, because I can see my audience at 22 minutes, be 250 people there in the audience, right? Now, if I get up there and talk about politics, especially Canadian politics, and just go into a joke about it, you would get it. They're not going to get it. They don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So I had to go, the other day, this happened. Chris D'Entremont is from Nova Scotia. He crossed the floor, right? And then I make my joke. And I'll do these little video monologues where I start off with, here's the story. Here's why this is interesting.
Right.
I'm starting to talk about it. At the start of the 2 minutes, they have no idea what I'm talking about. By the end, they're going, that's how I feel about that too. So you're kind of letting people know things. And I think that it's a lot of people will find out about things from some clip that goes viral on TikTok or what have you. And you'd be surprised how many people aren't interested or don't know. And I think sometimes by making fun of it, you can let people know about it who wouldn't ordinarily hear about it. But also, you bring people around sometimes to your side because you're not going to laugh at something you disagree with. So you kind of have to have humor is like when you're in a group of people, somebody says something, you can't believe they said it, everybody laughs. They might not have said that, but they have to kind of agree with it to have laughed at, right? And I always say humor is the only honest art form in that we can all go to see a play and we can all applaud. We can hear a song, we can applaud. We can go to a ballet and come out afterwards and say, oh, the dancing was amazing. But humor, if you don't laugh, if you don't do something akin to sneezing or vomiting, it's a bodily reaction. You failed every time, right? So it brings people together. And I think sometimes laughter, it won't diminish something, but it can make something seem less scary and that you're able to conquer it because you all agree and you see it for what it is sometimes.
Okay, so you are practicing your craft on the national broadcaster in a country that is, well, let's say 75% anti-Trump, and outside of Alberta, more than that. So it's pretty no consequences to do the kind of humor you do. But in the States, where Stephen Colbert have been practicing his craft and Jimmy Kimmel has been practicing his craft, etc., it's a 50-50 proposition. And it's pretty clear that people that like Trump don't find those jokes about him funny. And it's all obvious watching Colbert that he didn't intend his show to be inclusive of MAGA people. He didn't intend them to find his show entertaining or funny. He's making fun of them as much as anybody. So were they finding the right balance there, or is there some different obligation on people on television? I mean, it's certainly more pointed than it would have been in the past. Johnny Carson would never have been like that, for example.
Well, Carson was a whole different thing. He'd do like everything was pretty light across the board. Used to be you had to be more, both sides. I think Colbert in particular was very, very heavily. Like one thing, like I know Trudeau, right? Like I've gotten to know him over the years from making fun of him. And, socially I'd see him, every now and then. Get along fine. Lots of people, Peter MacKay, same way. Lots of people, all kind of parties and stuff like that. But I've never donated to the party, or I've never campaigned for it, or anything like that. So I think there's when you start doing that stuff, I think it's kind of a bit harder for someone in the middle maybe to hop on board the train. And sometimes comedy can become campaigning. I never really.
You suggesting that Colbert crossed that line?
It's a personal decision. I don't think it's a line or whatever, but it's a certain time when you saw that shift and change, right?
Well, I'm trying to figure out about him being canceled. So is it a reasonable proposition for the network to say this is too partisan to be aired?
No. I think that it is a reasonable thing for them to say, maybe we should counter this with a different show or a different voice or what have you, or put another element. I wouldn't cancel it. They didn't cancel it because of partisan stuff. They canceled it because Donald Trump was threatening them.
Right.
And there's a big company and it's a lot more money. But we have a place where a man was almost prime minister who wanted to take us off the air. We had a guy And I've gotten lots of DMs from conservatives, there's a couple of members of parliament who are like, don't you do that again. How dare you do that? I'm like, I don't give a frick, but I'm also not going to, but I get like death threats about stuff like the ostrich. We did an ostrich sketch and got death
Thank
threats.
God they're dead, man. I
But
couldn't take another story about them. It was just unbelievable.
But that's the grift again, right? So you'll have your Ezras and your different people in there, and it's like it's a chance to make some money off something. And there's all these bad actors going out there and riling things up, for money and donations and stuff like that. But I don't think there's enough money in Canada for it to have ever gotten that way. But there's enough that Mr. Polyev would take the whole network off because he thinks it criticizes him. So it's not that different in a way. There are lots of similarities, but I don't think Colbert crossed the line. I just think he went deeper down a path and kind of made that decision to become a warrior for it, never thinking that this guy had the power or the interest to call up a network and say, get rid of that guy, which is horrible because we've entered a new stage.
Well, it's because he will arbitrarily use the power of the federal government over, say, licensing decisions to hold that company to account for what it puts on the air. It's not a democracy anymore.
We're getting closer to North Korea every day, and people
are afraid of the government. No matter how big and important you are, they're afraid of the government, and that is not a liberal democracy, in my opinion.
Or in mine, I think it's insane, and it's what's amazing is how people keep floating down the river, and they're like, oh, okay, it's like, whoa, this is a big deal. So that's what shocks me. I thought that would be a bigger thing, and the same thing, with all the Kimmel stuff and everything, and it's a sad time.
Right. So, hey, back here in Canada, you have some new material. Prime Minister Carney.
Yes.
Is he an inherently funny person to talk about? Is there a lot to work with there?
He is kind of interesting in that he is very much a character, like I suggested Mark McKinney play him on our show, and he's done a good job because how do you do the guy? And then he was able to do the voice. It's like he's not a big crazy voice or anything, but he does a good job. And then I've been writing a bunch of those sketches, and that kind of overly reserved banker kind of guy, and he and Trump together are very interesting because they're two sides of a similar coin, but very different, and finance bros. But he's interesting. I got to interview him, and last year I went to Tim Hortons with him. During the election, had a sit down, which was interesting because the Tim Hortons wasn't closed, and that was a kind of a failure on my part. And don't just roll up to a Tim Hortons with the Prime Minister, a bunch of Mounties, by the way, and a camera, thinking, "Oh, did we not call?" It was a mess. Anyway, but it was fun. But he was good, and I was like, "Okay, I don't know. Never met this man before. I've known nothing about him, but I was impressed by his comfort and lack of anyone saying, what are you saying? Are you going to say this? Are you going to say that? He sat down. He was completely comfortable, and he surprised me. And he's a very charming guy when you meet him, which you don't expect. But the audience, it's maybe a bit too. The problem is people will make decisions in the group mind of the country over who that person is, kind of like they did with Trudeau, and it's very early on for comedy with him. Starting to get into it now. People are forming opinions now. And a lot of this elbows up stuff is elbows down, elbows up, elbows down. People are seeing that. And he's a long game guy, which I find interesting because we're not in a long game world. And it's people don't know it's very hard to do an impression of someone when people don't yet know who he is or have an opinion of him really. So that's been interesting watching that unfold. But yeah, McKinney's doing a great job.
Right. And Polyev, what do you pull out of him and emphasize to make the caricature?
Well, Chris Wilson does all that so beautifully. I think there is do you remember Foghorn Leghorn?
Well, of course. Shut up while I'm talking to you, boy.
I say boy, I say boy. And then there's the little guy, the chicken hawk with the glasses. Chicken hawk. That's people. In a way. It's the chicken hawk a bit older who thinks he's using a bit of Foghorn Leghorn. but he is the chicken hawk, you know?
Yeah.
And I've
Chest
never
puffed
seen,
out, though.
I say boy, I say you there, boy, but it doesn't quite work the same way. And I think he's going to get meaner the more desperate he gets. I think the smarmy, like I don't know. I met him a couple of times, you know, and, you know, passed across. And then I always thought, okay, well, he's very funny. He's very bright. But he has this kind of like, it should be me. How dare they? It's my turn kind of an attitude,
Right.
which I think even people who like him maybe kind of go a bit, you know? Your audiences, like, I've been in front of a lot of audiences, and they all kind of go, "Eey," as his personality is. I think even as when you take off the glasses and put on the tight t-shirt and change it as much as you can, where there are flashes underneath the veneer of who he is that come out a bit too often for the actor work, you know? And so he's a very interesting character for anybody. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again in our time. Somebody gets so close and then to kind of have it pulled out.
Very loosey footballish for sure.
Oh my God, we'll never see that again. It was fascinating. Yeah. And he's still talking about Trudeau, you know? Yeah. And it's, we did a sketch on 22 where I wrote one where it's Halloween and he comes kind of, Trump comes trick-or-treating at Carney's, the Rito Cottage, and then he shows up and he's talking about, you know, trick the treat. And it's like, and Carney says, don't worry, he is haunted. He haunts the place still, and he's still around. It's like, don't worry, he is not of substance. He cannot hurt you. But that's the way I think of him now as like a ghost almost who's haunting the place. Jugmeat's gone, Trudeau's gone, and he's still there. And it's
a relic of that past. Yeah.
Yeah, because normally they all go, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, and here's in the new set, and here's the new set. And we still have one left over from last year's set. And it's so anyway, but who knows? The way things have been turned around lately. God only knows.
One thing I notice about politicians over the years is they don't understand how endearing it is to be self-deprecating. And they don't understand that the only way for them to be funny is to be self-deprecating. Politicians are not allowed to be funny at somebody else's expense. You can only be funny at their own expense. Mm-hmm. And yet I watch them with you and people like you, and they rarely seem to get that. Who are some politicians that you felt have had that self-awareness to be self-deprecating and actually roll with the jokes?
Well, I tell you, one guy I was always impressed me was Peter MacKay. Because, you know, it's interesting because he's a big sports guy and everything. And sports guys generally aren't great, you know, with that kind of thing because very competitive, right? So there's politician plus competitive, but he's an East Coast guy, you know, well-off family and stuff. But I remember when a couple of times with him, I remember when the whole Belinda Stronach thing happened, the breakup and everything. And I was up on the hill.
He gave you a lot of material.
Yeah, but we used to be up in scrum, and those days used to be up scrumming all the time. And after last question, I'd come in and ask a few questions, right? And he was there. He wouldn't come out. So I got someone to give a note and said, could you give this to a Page to give to McKay for me? Yeah. Another politician. It's like, okay. And the note said, Peter, it's Critch. Stop being such a friggin' sook. Come out. And he did. And he came out and he's like, all right. And I just roast him, you know, and he's like, and he was always great. And another time when he was getting in trouble for all the travel and stuff and everything on the helicopters, I had to make up a jetpack, and he was staying away from the press. And we went to a little tiny thing he was doing at a small church in Nova Scotia. And I showed up with this jetpack by the door, and I'm like, he's giving a speech, and he's like, shake his head, no, not here, not now. And I'm nodding. I'm like, yeah, it's going to happen. He's like, no, don't, no. And I'm like, going to happen. I'm by the door. And he's like, and he comes down, he does the whole thing. But like, he was always somebody, and Harper hated that, right? Harper didn't want him doing that stuff. And I always respected that, you know, that he got it. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. Because we have a weird thing in this country where this is a thing. It's not really a thing in the same way in many other places where a guy will show up or they'll sit there, and it's not like a talk show format. It's more like, I'm just going to come to you. So I find this an interesting thing that some of them still kind of think they had to do it. And I was the youngest guy. I was the new Rick Mercer guy. Nobody knew who I was.
Right.
And I had to go up there, chase them. And now they'll kind of come and do the show so it's interesting to see a lot of politicians now grown up. It's been on the show 33 years. A lot of politicians have never known a world when it wasn't on television.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Right. Mark Delahunty.
Oh my God. Right.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So listen, you through a series of events, you got the last interview Trudeau did as Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And did you have a sense that day that he was beaten? Did you have a sense that day that he would be resigning?
You kind of, no, not really. I see it coming because that was before the Chrystia Freeland bomb, right? But I think kind of the plan then was he's going to kind of cascade away, and then Carney would have come in and been given a finance role or something, and then he would be, you know what I mean? Hey, here's this guy, and then I think they were going to do like the little tradesies that way, and I think he was going to go, but I also think, though, that he felt that maybe Pierre was going to win, and I think he kind of felt he could beat him if it got down to it. Like by the time it was the debate, I can turn this around.
Right.
Like Superman catching a plane.
Crazy shit.
But I think he did believe that, but I do kind of feel like it was an on the way out Mr. Carney coming in kind of situation anyway. But I think what Ms. Freeland did was kind of actually make that just happen a much faster and cleaner kind of a situation, and finally call it, right? Because it had gone on way too long, as everyone knew. But no, I didn't think but I gave him that thing. So there were all the F Trudeau flags. So I had one made that said "Good luck, Trudeau," instead of, because I knew that
unfurled it.
And I brought that there, and the Mounties kind of know me, and the people in the PMO knew me. And then, but there was a local PR person in Quebec with the party, and she's like, "You had to show me what this is." And I'm like, "I can't. You had to show me." I'm like, "Listen, if I show you, you're going to say, 'Oh no, you can't do that,' but I can do that. It'll work out. You got to trust me." It's like, "I don't know you." And I'm like, "They know me." And like some of the Mounties and stuff, like, it's fine. He won't mind that. So we do the thing, and I'm unfurling it, and I see her in the corner, her eyes big as socks. She's going to get fired because it looked like an F Trudeau flag. And he himself didn't know. And I'm pulling out. At one point, he goes, "Oh, Critch, like, why are you doing this to me?" Because I pulled out the joint in his office one time. He didn't like that too. And it was pulling out. But I had "Good luck, Trudeau," kind of like "Good luck in here," but I kind of meant it to be a sayonara, because I felt that would be probably the last time that I would have, right? So for me, I did it as a goodbye. But I didn't realize how quickly it would become goodbye.
Interesting. All right, listen, I have to end on a question that is extremely important. And I want you to understand how much is riding on this answer.
Okay.
Right? On a scale of 1 to 10,
yeah.
how funny is Scott Reed?
Wow. He's always been very nice to me. He is very funny. I would give 8 to 10 have to be like professional comedians, or like, very whack. I'll give him a 7. I'd give him a strong 7.
That's very good. I think that's a very good score. He should be proud of that score.
No. I mean, like 8 to 10, like that's where you
moment.
put in your Colberts and your different people in there because they're professionals. But
Right.
7, most folks are a 5. I would at least give him a 7.
Yes. Excellent. There you go. You've made his weekend. You've made my week. Thanks for coming on this show.
Oh, man. And like I say,
such a delight to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure, and I hope I get to see you again soon in person.
Yeah. Me too. Well, invite me to something that you're doing.
Oh, come to
It's
anything.
fun.
Where are you living?
I live in Toronto and outside of Ottawa, one of those two places. Not in Ottawa, either outside of Ottawa.
I'll have a book launch in Toronto, which will be fun. Mark McKinney is going to be hosting it. And we're having a little event at the Irish Embassy in Ottawa. So I'll drop you a line. Either of those, please come to.
I will definitely go to the book launch because I need an actual hard copy of the book. Because
I will give you
your
one.
Your publisher kindly provided me with an advance copy. And so I've only read it electronically. But boy, God, it is really, really sitting by yourself on the couch reading, laugh out loud funny.
That means the world to me coming from you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right, brother. Thanks for doing this. We'll see you
pal.
soon.
Cheers. All the best.
Herle Burly,